So there was this one, more recently in terms of experiences that we've had in thinking through hard times. A couple years back, this is always kind of a weird story to tell because there's no normal way to tell this, right? It's rather personal, but it's a kind of a weird thing to say. So I had a cyst on my testicle. Yeah. Which is such a weird, like, how do you say that in a normal way? It's like, I had this thing on my balls.
Yeah, I remember. I remember the phone call.
Yeah, I
remember the call.
And of course, in the demographic that I'm in and the age that I'm in, the first thing that I think, and it was painful, and the first thing that I think is like, I might have testicular cancer. Yeah, like this is crazy. And at the time we had my second child, and I'm thinking like, hey, are we going to expand the family? Like would it be possible for me to have another like all these?
And then you
things,
had right,
and then I'm like, I'm good.
I don't. Just kidding.
Like I'm out.
Just bagging on right. Nah, he's a good kid.
So then I'm thinking about all these things, and it's scary, and you think about how is this going to play out, and all this kind of stuff, and. I had a buddy of mine who's an oncologist. He had come over, and it was one of those funny conversations that you have where I go in my back office and I'm like, "Hey man, let me show you something." He's like, "Whoa,
bro.
It's like, but I digress. But what ended up happening is it was benign. Yeah. And they gave me this medication to take to dissolve the cyst.
I remember this. Yeah.
And as people probably hear just by the way I converse and the conversations I have with people, earlier in life I used to be like this. Now I'm like this, for sure. And would not consider myself an overly emotional person. We are Mr. Spock and Captain.
It's a good analogy for us. Captain Kirk, Mr. Spock's a good analogy. That's about right.
But I would consider myself like this. But earlier on in life, I kind of felt I was a different way. I was kind of swinging from up and down, up and down, up and down. Well, I took this medication to dissolve the cyst and didn't even think anything of it. And certainly for the first time in my adult life, I woke up a couple of days later and I was emotionally destroyed. Yeah. Like emotionally just completely destroyed.
Yeah.
And I
remember that. I remember us talking about this like a few times a day actually at that time.
And I went to work, and there was a guy, Mark, a homeless guy who on the way to work every day, I'd always, bring him some food in the morning or shake his hand. And it was one of those things where, even physical touch of somebody, like this person, nobody wants to touch him, and they walk by and they shun him whenever they see him. And every time I would see Mark, I would like ask him how he was doing and like physically shake his hand, right? And I go into work this morning, and it's what I used to call when I was a kid a dark day. It was as if there was just a dark cloud over the day. Mm-hmm. And I go into work, and I see Mark, and I shake his hand, and I get up to my office because I got in there really early, around 6:15, 6:30, and I just put my head down on my desk and was just crying hysterically. Yeah. Because it was this notion where my biggest fear in life is that I can't make enough of a difference. Yeah. And I felt that I was just there seeing this man that I couldn't really help, and I just couldn't make enough of a difference. And so I called you, and I'm talking to you, and you're like, dude, what did you do differently today? Yeah. And I can't get out of this funk. I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with me. And I didn't even think, because my day is so regimented. Yeah. I run every single day. Yeah. I pretty much eat the same thing for 3 meals. My day is so regimented, and I never even thought about it. He's like, no. And you challenged me on it. What did you do different today that you haven't done for the rest of your life? Because you're off. You're off, and there's something wrong. And I thought about it, and I was like, oh, well, I took this medication. You're stop taking it. Yeah. Stop taking it. Call my father-in-law, tell him what the medication is. He's like, oh, well, geez, like some of the side effects could be depression, suicidal thoughts, all this kind of stuff. And it's like, whoa. Yeah. And that was the first time, certainly in my adult life, I felt what it's like and I thought people deal with this day in
Every
and day out.
single day.
People live
Just like this.
in that valley.
Every day.
They live there.
Every day.
So one thing that I definitely want to say, and I would be remiss if I did not say that on this podcast, if you need help, get help.
Yeah. And it's okay.
And it's okay. Because that taste of what that might feel like, I can't imagine what it would be like and the courage that people have to live through that day in
Every single day.
and day out.
Every single
Because
day.
that is not the cross that I have to bear.
No. It took medication for you
But
to
I
feel that
felt
way.
it.
But imagine feeling that, waking up in the morning and feeling like that every single day.
I felt it.
It's devastating.
I felt it. And having you around, if I didn't have somebody who had the courage
To tell you.
check it and tell me and say, hey, dude, like, you're off. If I didn't have that, like, what possibly could have happened?
I remember that moment. I remember that conversation, and I remember thinking to myself, this is not my brother. Like, you're having an out-of-body experience. It did not make sense to me. Literally, you're one of the most optimistic people that I've ever met in my life. You're always optimistic. I mean, you're optimistic, not I lost. You know, and I will never forget that conversation. And the next day, it's like it never happened. And I bring that up because imagine that swing if that's happening to somebody in a natural state. And what I also want to challenge people to do is, if you recognize this in somebody, be a friend and help them and tell them and let them know that they are safe to talk about that and discuss these kinds of things with you. When you're seeing these swings up and down, be the friend who's in tune with your friend and help, because you might save a life.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
with that said, it's always an honor. It's always a pleasure. I wish everyone could have a best friend like you. I'm pretty sure our listeners will hear that repeatedly. But again, please keep in mind always that this is about perspective. We must always learn from one another. We don't shut anybody out. We are all human beings first. And I think if we keep that perspective and understand that there will be lows, but fear not, the highs are coming as well. It's a part of the human condition. It's a part of living this life. And fortunately for us, we get to live it as Americans.
Amen to that.
Thank you all for listening.
Yep.